everyone. Welcome to the Dave Ray Show. I'm here with Senator Bill Hagerty. How are you, Senator Hagerty?
I'm doing well, Dave. It's always good to be with you, my friend. I appreciate your hard work, your support on the campaign trail with me, and I'm up here fulfilling the promises I made. It's a challenge every day, I must say, because we just have an onslaught from the left here. You know, they've got this notion of transforming America. I don't think that's what Joe Biden was elected to do. He's got the narrowest majority. If you think about it, just a few seats in the House. We're at a 50-50 Senate. Yet they're behaving in a manner that would make you think that they had some sort of overwhelming mandate, which they clearly do not. And then Biden, campaigned on the notion that he was going to bring America together. His inaugural speech was all about unity and unification. You should see what his speech was like in Atlanta this week. It was all about division, smearing his opponents. And that's what this whole administration has done since their arrival. They've gone in and tried to destroy and tear apart the successes of President Trump. And they have created disaster after disaster after disaster. They've refused to take responsibility for anything. I'm still waiting for someone to resign over Afghanistan, to take responsibility there. You know, the foreign minister of Britain stepped down over Afghanistan. The Dutch foreign minister stepped down over Afghanistan. The Biden administration is still trying to claim it was some sort of victory because they only lost 13 men and women in uniform and, countless numbers of Afghans, but somehow they lifted a lot of people out. So that's a victory. It is unbelievable how brazen that they've been. And now they're trying to divert everyone's attention onto this voting bill. This is something that's really for the politicians. It's not for the people. It puts money in the pockets of politicians to fund their campaigns with taxpayer money. I don't think Tennesseans want this. They want to do away with very common sense voter ID laws. That's very popular all across America, that a person actually can demonstrate they are who they are. They're down in Atlanta saying that it's somehow a bigotry to ask for an identification for a person is allowed to vote. Yet right here in Washington, D.C., the seat of the federal government, they require a vaccine card and a photo ID just to get entrance to a restaurant. The hypocrisy of this is just amazing. Again, what they're trying to do is federalize the elections because they think that gives them a competitive advantage. They look at the same numbers I do. They are in the tank. The Democrats are in the tank because of their failed policies. So this is a desperate attempt to grab power, change the rules, and try to find a way for them to hold on to power, even though the American public are very unhappy with them.
Yes. So Senator Hagerty, you're in your coming up on your second year in office now. So tell us about some achievements you've had in your first year.
Well, the legislation that we just put forward this week, we just passed it here in the Senate. Myself on a bipartisan basis with Senator Angus King, and I put this forward on a bipartisan basis, but it's legislation that addresses the semiconductor shortage here in America. I've talked with semiconductor CEOs. I'm a business person as my background, Dave, and that's been my world is business. So I reached out to the leaders of these semiconductor manufacturing firms and asked them what was preventing them from manufacturing here in America. We've got real issues. If you tried to buy a car lately, many things that require chips are in a great shortage right now. Yes. We don't have the production capacity here in America, and we're depending on places that are much more vulnerable and much more dangerous. Think China, think Taiwan, think South Korea, think Japan. That's where we have to go to get semiconductors right now. Why don't we have capacity here? Well, the CEOs told me that it takes too long to permit a manufacturing facility here in America. All of the environmental laws, the red tape, the regulations, you name it. Well, my team and I looked very hard at this infrastructure package that went through because there was a fast track program, a fast track permitting program in that legislation. It was designed to help get needed infrastructure in place sooner. Think roads and bridges. That makes sense, right? They've got to go through the same sort of drawn out environmental process that takes years and years. Well, there was a fast track program that was created. We decided to take that same construct and apply it to strategic industries like semiconductors. And that is now passed out of the Senate. I think it's got great chances to move through the House and get to the White House and become law. It only makes sense. It doesn't cost anything more. In fact, it will take cost out of the system because it's taking time out of the system. But it will also make us more competitive as a nation. It will make Tennessee, it will make America far more attractive to invest in semiconductor manufacturing. This is the type of common sense legislation that Tennesseans sent me to Washington to deliver. And that's what I'm doing.
Yes. So the filibuster, senators are trying to get rid of the filibuster. So tell me about your opinion on that.
Well, it's very interesting where the Democrats are on this. We're going to have a big showdown today. I'm going to be on the Senate floor later this afternoon defending the filibuster. Kyrsten Sinema is supposed to go on the floor any minute now to talk about her perspective on it. But what the Democrats are trying to do is completely change their posture from where they stood back in 2017. You may remember back in 2017, President Trump called on eliminating the filibuster. Presidents want to do this because they want to ram their legislation through. The Senate resisted it back in 2017. In fact, 32 Democrats wrote a heartfelt letter saying that the filibuster was absolutely critical to the functioning of democracy. I've got a quote or two here if you want to hear it. This is a great one. Eliminating the filibuster would be, quote, the end of the Senate. That was a statement made in 2018 by the #2 Democrat in the Senate, Durbin from Illinois. It's still right today, but that's what he was saying then. Now he and Chuck Schumer, before he became majority leader, said that it would be a disaster for democracy. They basically said it would be the end of democracy if Republicans, when they were in control, were somehow to undo the filibuster and go to a sheer majority, not the 60-person requirement, but just a sheer, basic majority, 50+1. What's the reason for the filibuster? What it requires right now, because we've been in a very tight Senate for many, many years. So it requires slowing down, working with the other side, finding areas of compromise, and finding things that we can actually agree upon on a bilateral basis that will be enduring. And the fact that it has been agreed upon by both Democrats and Republicans ensures stability. It's not just political stability. It's economic competitiveness for America, because it's our economy that's at stake too. If we happen to turn to the direction they want us to a sheer majority, then what's going to happen when Republicans take over? We're just going to undo everything that the Democrats did. And it'll be back and forth like a seesaw. America's going to become a much less reliable place to invest. Our economy is going to be weaker as a result of that. And our politics are going to be far more divisive and far more, far more electric than they are even now. So very bad idea. Thankful that Joe Manchin from West Virginia, Kirsten Sinema from Arizona are willing to stand up to their party.
Yes.
They're going to have all 50 votes to get this done. I don't think they're going to get it done. And what they're going to use is this voting, the federalization of voting legislation as the tool to justify blowing up the filibuster. And Joe Biden is willing to call anybody that's against it a segregationist, a bigot, a racist, you name it. Even though what they're really trying to do is just get a permanent power grab, a permanent advantage for themselves, and they'll smear anybody that wants to disagree with them.
Yes. So the Biden administration has been working on trying to pass vaccine mandates through executive power, as a matter of fact. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, it's not going to withstand constitutional scrutiny. I've said this from the beginning. Biden said it at the very beginning. He said it's not the federal government's role. His press secretary backed that up. This is not the role for the federal government. You know what I think the precipitant of it was, Dave? After their numbers started cratering, after the Afghanistan debacle, they needed to get the news media's attention away from Afghanistan and the horror show that was going on over there. And they introduced this mandate requirement. It worked. The news media immediately shifted their attention to this, but all they did was create another crisis. Think about what's going to happen at TSA, at the airlines, the companies that are in, critical spaces that are going to have to shut down, fire employees. We can't afford to lose 5, 6, 10% of our employees at TSA. It's going to shut down the air traffic system. You look at the truck drivers, they typically work alone. They don't meet the mandate. They're not able to drive the truck. I've talked with employers across Tennessee. Many of the people that were in industries that were deemed critical at the time that worked through the pandemic, this is before there were any vaccines, and probably got COVID. They're not willing to take into account the natural immunity that people might have acquired. So I think what they're trying to do is insert themselves between a doctor and a patient. They're trying to insert themselves between an employee and an employer. It's not the appropriate role for the federal government. Look, I've taken the vaccine. I think that what President Trump did with Operation Warp Speed was a miracle. It has worked for me. That was the right decision for me to take it. But I don't think the federal government's role is to impose that on companies and force them to fire their employees who come to a different decision.
Mm-hmm. So voting rights is a big topic in the news right now. So talk about your opinion on voting rights.
Well, again, it's another typical misnomer here in Washington. This isn't about voting rights. This is about partisan politicians holding on to power. What they want to do is federalize the elections. The Constitution is clear. Election laws are the domain of state legislatures. They're the ones that set the laws, yet they're moving into a state like Georgia in saying that Georgia's effort to come back and tighten things up after they were so dramatically loosened during the pandemic is somehow, bigotry, somehow Jim Crow 2.0, as they call it. When you look at what Georgia is doing, they're much less restrictive than Biden's home state of Delaware.
Right.
Chuck Schumer is complaining about the inability to hand out water in a voting line. That's the rule in New York State, where Chuck Schumer is from. The hypocrisy here knows no end. Again, Joe Biden was down there complaining about Georgia's laws that are less restrictive than his own home state. And again, willing to smear people from Georgia, say that they are, quote, Jim Crow 2.0, just to get their way. The reason they want to federalize these elections is they want to significantly weaken them. And in a way that they must believe they have a competitive advantage. I'll take you back to a study that was done by former President Jimmy Carter, former Secretary of State James Baker. They took a look at election security in America. What they came out with were areas of the highest concern for election fraud. You know what they were? Mail-in balloting was one of them.
Yes.
This legislation that they're pushing forward wants to federalize mail-in balloting, wants to require it. Ballot harvesting is another. That's where people go to a nursing home or another institution and collect ballots, and then they can be paid to do it. And then it's upon we're relying on them to turn in all the ballots, or is it the ones they want to turn in, not others? And these areas are fraught with fraud opportunities. They want to introduce that. They want to weaken the system, and they want to do away with voter ID. Ask yourself, why would they want to do away with voter ID if it weren't their intent to make it easier to cheat? What Republicans want is to make it harder to cheat and make it more secure. We want access to voting. Look, there's no problem. We had record-breaking attendance in 2020 in terms of voter turnout. That's not the problem. They're trying to create a crisis yet again. The same legislation they wheeled out back in early 2017, I think it was 4 days after President Trump took office. They tried the same thing. The crisis at that point was the fact that Trump won. Remember the whole hoax about Russia collusion? That was what they pointed to then. Then they wanted to change all the election laws when the pandemic hit. And at a state by state level, a lot of changes did take place. Now, as legislatures come back to try to address it, they want to come and say it's the legislatures themselves that are the crisis and we've got to stop it. They'll look for any crisis. They'll try to make the most out of it. But let me be very, very clear. This is about the politicians. It's not about the people.
Yes. Well, Senator Hagerty, is there anything you'd like to add? I know you're kind of in a tight time frame here, so.
I just want to say this. I appreciate patriots like you helping us get the word out. It's difficult in this environment to really help our citizens understand what's happening. When you have Democrats misnaming bills up here like For the People Act, when it's really for the politicians, when you have massive inflation as a result of their spending and they try to point to corporate greed or say that it's transitory when it's their policies that blew up our energy independence and have caused gas to go up 50% at the pump. The ability to talk with you and get to your network of friends is a huge benefit for me and for the Republicans here. So I very much appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a staunch believer that unbiased media is so important, and we have a lack of that today. So, well, Senator, it was a great enjoyment of time to be able to meet with you today. So thank you for coming on. Hope to have you on again soon.
Thank you. Good to be with you as always. Thanks, Dave.